Well, for more on how tariffs are impacting the textile industry, let's bring in Rick Helfenbein. He's president and CEO of the American Apparel and Footwear Association. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So I'm sure you were quite concerned when you saw that the sportswear, outdoor products, textiles, all included in this tariff list. Why do you think it was targeted?
Well, we call this the third tranche. The first tranche was the $34 billion and the $16 billion, and fortunately, I actually testified for that first round, and USTR was very kind to us. They removed some of the things that we thought would affect the consumer. In this next round, which is $200 billion, with tariffs that could be as low as 10%, as high as 25%, we are really concerned because they are going after some consumables. They've gone after hats, they've gone after handbags, they've gone after baseball gloves. And I was at the hearing today, this morning. Our group testified, and it's very disconcerting. The gentleman who was on before was talking about pain. I thought it was more about politics, prose, and practicality. The people who were testifying were saying how wonderful it was to do business in China and how tariffs would affect them so negatively. And that's it's a big concern. Our economy is going great guns right now. Retail is doing terrific.
Right.
And are these tariffs going to end all that? What's the purpose of the tariffs? We're taxing ourselves. What are we, crazy?
Now, as you mentioned, the USTR did make some adjustments before, but a lot of people are wondering, will that still be the case? How much weight do you think these hearings have on what the Trump administration will finally end up doing?
Well, USTR is like the mediator between us and the government, and they do listen, and they're very helpful. But there's only so much they can do. You have to look at the big picture numbers. Here's the big picture number. Last year, we bought from China $505 billion. We sold $130 billion. We have a $375 billion trade deficit. It's the trade deficit that President Trump has been talking about so often. He'd like to reduce that. But you're going to reduce it with tariffs? I don't think so. In fact, the deficit is getting bigger.
And we did hear a lot of concern about people perhaps supporting this idea of wanting to level the playing field, but not using tariffs. Talk about how this is going to really trickle through the supply chain if these tariffs go into effect.
Well, there's a lot about if the tariffs go into effect. It's affecting the supply chain already. Remember, in apparel and footwear, we plan 6 to 9 months in advance. So people who are preparing for when these might hit are already making plans. Every company we represent has set up some sort of war room where they're planning their strategy. And you could say, why? Very simple. 41% of all apparel coming into the United States comes from China. 72% of all footwear, 84% of all accessories. Consequently, we have a big stake in China, and you're going to raise that by 25%? Do you know what that's going to do to retail? It's going to be a disaster.
And what about for Chinese exporters? How do you see operations changing for them? Some might perhaps choose other locations, Cambodia, other countries that are popping up.
Well, if you look at just apparel and you say, okay, 41% comes from China, 13% comes from Vietnam. So between the two countries, got 55% of all apparel coming into the United States. Between 5 countries, add in Bangladesh, Indonesia, India, and you've got 70% of everything coming into the United States. Consequently, we got a big problem here. There's no place to offload this. You can't move it that fast. We are trapped in our own supply chain. So if the tariffs go into effect, we are taxing ourselves. And to bring down the trade deficit, it's not going to work. It's really not going to work. Trade deficit shouldn't be a measure. If they were such a good measure, then Russia would have a great economy and America would have a lousy economy. It doesn't make sense.
Now, as we know, President Trump is pushing ahead with this because he said it's better for American workers and American consumers and American businesses. If you could speak to the president and give your argument, what would you say?
Look, the president is doing this because right now it plays well with politics. He has the authority to do it. He has the authority to be the enforcer. Consequently, he's going ahead with it because it hasn't crash landed yet. I suspect if the NAFTA talks are successful, which are hopefully coming to a conclusion, he'll continue fast forward with China. But if the NAFTA talks aren't successful, I think he's going to have to back off. And the reason being the American farmer. Our commodity prices are getting trashed right now. Apparel and footwear, that'll come down the road. That'll be the consumable portion. That's where your average American consumer is going to freak out. Very simply put, and I've said this to a lot of people, because in this 200 billion tranche, they're talking about travel goods, handbags, backpacks. You know, we're in back-to-school season right now.
Right.
You're going to go buy your kid a backpack, you better buy two. I mean, think about it. The price could be $20 this year. It could be $30 next year. We're killing our own gorgeous economy with the idea of these tariffs.
We'll have to see if the president heeds your advice. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you. Rick Helfenbein, President and CEO of the American Apparel and Footwear Association.